Close your eyes for a moment and picture a prehistoric monster. What do you see? Perhaps it's the thundering footsteps and bone-crushing jaws of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Maybe it's the gentle, earth-shaking grace of a long-necked Brachiosaurus, or the armored, three-horned face of a Triceratops. These creatures are icons, etched into our collective imagination. They are the undisputed superstars of ancient life. The age of dinosaurs feels like the beginning of it all, the epic, first chapter of life on a grand scale. But what if I told you that this chapter was not the beginning? What if I told you that long before the first dinosaur ever walked the Earth, our planet was ruled by another dynasty of titans? A world of supermonsters so strange, so alien, they make a T-Rex look almost conventional. This was a lost epoch, a forgotten kingdom whose rulers were a bizarre menagerie of evolutionary experiments. Welcome to the Permian period, a chapter in Earth's history spanning from 299 to 252 million years ago. This was a time when the world's continents were crushed together into one vast, lonely landmass called Pangaea, a world of scorching deserts and lush, swampy coastlines. And roaming this world were creatures that defy easy categorization, a lost bestiary of animals that were neither reptile nor mammal, but something in between, something else. These forgotten monsters are more than just a historical curiosity. They hold the key to understanding the very origins of the two great dynasties of the animal kingdom, and one of them leads directly to us. This is the story of that world, the world before the dinosaurs. To understand this alien world, we must first understand the great schism that defined it. Life had already conquered the land, but it was now diverging down two fundamentally different paths, two great branches of the vertebrate family tree that were locked in a silent, evolutionary struggle for dominance. On one branch were the sauropsids, the ancestors of all modern reptiles, dinosaurs, and birds. On the other, and far more dominant in the early Permian, were the synapsids. This group is profoundly important because it is the branch that would, after hundreds of millions of years of trials and tribulations, eventually give rise to every mammal on Earth, including you and me. The key difference between them was a subtle but crucial piece of anatomical engineering hidden in their skulls. Sauropsids had a solid skull structure behind the eyes, like their ancient amphibian ancestors. Synapsids, however, had evolved an opening in the skull behind each eye socket. This hole, called a temporal fenestra, wasn't just a random feature, it was a brilliant innovation. It allowed for the attachment of larger, more powerful jaw muscles, turning a simple bite into a devastatingly effective weapon. It was this evolutionary advantage that allowed the synapsids to become the first true kings of the terrestrial world. And the most famous of these early synapsid rulers is a creature you have almost certainly seen before, but likely misunderstood. Its name is Dimetrodon. It grew up to 15 feet long, had a sprawling, powerful build, and a mouth full of differentiated teeth, some for shearing, some for piercing. But its most spectacular feature was the enormous, magnificent sail of skin stretched over a rack of bony spines rising from its back. For decades, Dimetrodon was lumped in with the dinosaurs in museum displays and children's books, but it was no dinosaur. In fact, it lived and died out more than 40 million years before the first dinosaurs appeared. Dimetrodon was a synapsid. It was, in the most literal sense, one of our own deep, distant relatives. That stunning sail wasn't for show either. It was a marvel of biological technology. Paleontologists believe it functioned as a sophisticated thermoregulatory device. In the cool Permian mornings, Dimetrodon could turn its sail toward the sun, rapidly absorbing heat and warming its blood. This would allow it to become active and start hunting long before its cold-blooded prey, and competitors could shake off the night's chill. Conversely, if it got too hot, it could face the wind, using the sail to dissipate excess heat. Dimetrodon wasn't just a brute, it was a finely tuned, high-performance predator, the apex of its time, all thanks to adaptations that gave it a critical edge in the struggle for survival. The rise of highly efficient predators like Dimetrodon triggered a classic evolutionary arms race. As the hunters became faster and deadlier, the hunted had to become tougher and more formidable to survive. The plains and swamps of the Permian period became a testing ground for some of the most bizarre defensive strategies nature has ever conceived. The herbivores of this age were not the gentle, defenseless grazers you might imagine. They were living fortresses. Consider the Scutosaurus, a massive Paraeosauran early type of sauropsid reptile that rumbled across the landscapes of late Permian Russia. This creature was built like a battle tank. Growing up to 10 feet long and weighing over a ton, its body was covered in bony plates called osteoderms embedded directly in its skin, forming a suit of natural armor. As if that weren't enough, its skull was thick, knobby, and adorned with spiky protrusions on its cheeks. Scutosaurus was a walking bastion, a slow-moving but incredibly well-protected plant-eater that would have been a daunting meal for any predator. But the synapsids weren't just producing predators, they also evolved their own brand of bizarre, heavily armed herbivores. In the same Russian ecosystems, you might have found the Estimenosuchus, a creature whose name means crowned crocodile, though it was no crocodile at all. This synapsid was a dinocephalian, or terrible head, and it lived up to its name. Its skull was a grotesque masterpiece of bony ornamentation, featuring elaborate, moose-like antlers growing upwards and outwards from its head, and another horn-like structure protruding from its nose. These were likely not for defense against predators, but for display and brutal headbutting contests with rivals for mates or territory, much like modern-day stags. This arms race culminated in the evolution of the Permian's ultimate killing machine. As the herbivores got bigger and tougher, the predators had to keep pace. Enter the Gorgonopsians. These were the apex predators of the late Permian, a group of synapsids that truly earned their monstrous reputation. Ranging in size from that of a large dog to a polar bear, they were the planet's first saber-toothed carnivores. Their skulls were long and powerful, but their defining feature was a pair of enormous, dagger-like canine teeth that could be over 5 inches long. A Gorgonopsian like Inostrancevia was a perfect storm of speed, power, and weaponry. It likely had a more upright, mammal-like posture than the sprawling Dimetrodon, allowing for greater speed and agility. When it slammed its jaws shut, those saber teeth could shear through the thick hide and armor of creatures like Scutosaurus. Life in the late Permian was a relentless, high-stakes battle for survival, fought between these walking tanks and the saber-toothed nightmares that hunted them. The world of the Gorgonopsians and their armored prey was a thriving, complex, and violent kingdom. For millions of years, the synapsids reigned supreme, diversifying into a bewildering array of forms. The world was theirs, but their reign was about to come to a sudden and catastrophic end. The vibrant, teeming ecosystems of the Permian were perched on the edge of an abyss, about to be pushed into the single greatest biological crisis the world has ever known. The killer was not an asteroid from the heavens, like the one that would later wipe out the dinosaurs. The killer came from within the Earth itself. In a region of modern-day Siberia, a series of colossal volcanic eruptions began on a scale that dwarfs anything in human history. This was not a single volcano, but a vast volcanic province, known today as the Siberian Traps, which spewed lava and gas continuously for what may have been hundreds of thousands of years. It blanketed an area larger than Western Europe in molten rock miles deep. But the lava wasn't the main killer. The real weapon was invisible. The eruptions released an unimaginable quantity of carbon dioxide, methane, and other toxic gases into the atmosphere. The planet's climate systems buckled and broke. A runaway greenhouse effect took hold, causing global temperatures to soar by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. As the planet cooked, the oceans suffered. They became acidic from absorbing so much CO2, dissolving the shells of marine organisms. Worse still, the warming water could no longer hold dissolved oxygen, creating vast, dead, anoxic zones. On land, the world was dying. Acid rain poured from the skies, stripping forests bare. The heat and drought became unbearable. Food chains collapsed from the bottom up. The Scutosaurus had no plants to eat. The Gorgonopsians had no Scutosaurus to hunt. It was a global apocalypse, a systematic dismantling of the biosphere. We call this event the Permian Triassic extinction, but its more common nickname is far more evocative: the Great Dying. It was, without question, the closest life on Earth has ever come to being completely extinguished. When the dust and gas finally settled, an estimated 96% of all marine species and 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species were gone forever. The world of the forgotten supermonsters had fallen silent. In the desolate, toxic aftermath of the Great Dying, the Earth was a ghost planet. The once thriving ecosystems were now wastelands, populated only by the hardiest and luckiest of survivors. The mighty Gorgonopsians were gone. The armored parasaurs were gone. The magnificent sail-backed predators were a distant memory. The synapsid dynasty had been shattered. But in the rubble of this fallen world, a few creatures clung to life, and one of them would become a symbol of ultimate survival. Its name was Lystrosaurus. It was a synapsid, a member of a group called dicynodonts, or two dog teeth. About the size of a pig, it was a squat, barrel-chested herbivore with a peculiar turtle-like beak and two prominent tusks jutting down from its upper jaw. It was not particularly fast, intelligent, or well-armed. By all accounts, it was an unremarkable creature in the world before the extinction, but it had the right toolkit for the apocalypse. Its sturdy build and powerful forelimbs made it an excellent burrower, allowing it to dig dens to escape the brutal surface temperatures and toxic air. Its efficient lungs and circulatory system may have been uniquely adapted to thrive in a low-oxygen atmosphere. While nearly everything else died, Lystrosaurus prospered. In the empty world of the early Triassic period, it spread across the globe with astonishing speed. Its fossils are found from Antarctica to Russia to South Africa, providing some of the key evidence that the continents were once connected. For a time, Lystrosaurus was the most common terrestrial vertebrate on the planet, making up as much as 95% of the total animal population in some areas. It was a world of one. The Great Dying had wiped the slate clean. The long reign of the synapsids was over. This ecological vacuum created a once-in-a-billion-year opportunity. While survivors like Lystrosaurus held on, another group, the sauropsid branch of the family tree, began to experiment and diversify in the shadows. From a humble group of these survivors called archosaurs, or ruling lizards, a new dynasty would eventually emerge. They evolved a more efficient upright posture and superior respiratory systems perfectly suited for the low-oxygen world. Over millions of years, they grew larger, faster, and more dominant. This group would give rise to the crocodiles, the pterosaurs, and, most famously, the dinosaurs. The fall of the Permian monsters had directly paved the way for the rise of the titans to come. The story of the Permian is a profound and humbling reminder that history is not a linear march of progress. It is a chaotic tale of catastrophe, contingency, and incredible resilience. The world before the dinosaurs was not a mere prelude. It was a vibrant, complex age in its own right, ruled by creatures as spectacular as any that came after. Their forgotten world shows us that dominance is always temporary, and that the fate of life can pivot on a geological instant. As we now face our own human-induced climate crisis, the echoes of the Great Dying serve as a sobering lesson from deep time, a whisper from a lost world, reminding us of the profound fragility of the biosphere we call home.